You know, in public life, words are everything. They're chosen carefully, especially when someone's trying to deny something. So today, we're going to decode the language of political denial and see what it really tells us when public figures get pushed on the topic of racism. Okay, so let's start with the recent quote from Nigel Farage. I've never directly racially abused anybody. At first glance, it's a denial, plain and simple, but listen really closely to that one little word, directly. That single word, yeah, it's a huge clue, and it's exactly what we're going to dig into. Right, so what does that even mean? I've never directly. Does it imply there's some kind of acceptable indirect abuse? You see, phrasing like this isn't an accident, it's a strategy. And it wasn't the only interesting turn of phrase used to sidestep the issue. And here we go. Another key idea was introduced, as a defense, intent. The argument here is basically, if I didn't mean for it to be hurtful, then was it really hurtful? The whole focus on the speaker's personal motivation seemed to be the key. It's a very common tactic. So, what you start to see is that these carefully worded denials, they actually follow a pattern. They're not just random comments. And lucky for us, there's an actual tool we can use to see exactly what's happening just beneath the surface. And that tool is one that I, Dr. Shungu Mugadza, created. It's called the Six Stages Framework. And it's designed to help us map out the entire spectrum of responses to issues around bias and racism, from deep denial all the way to real leadership. So, the Six Stages Framework maps out behaviors on a spectrum on two axes, positive and negative. The negative axis is everything, which includes all the negative numbers below zero, up to -6. It describes things like denial, resistance, and causing harm. And everything above zero maps out a path towards something much more positive, going all the way to +6, which includes accountability, allyship, and real leadership. Now, so for what we're talking about today, we're going to zoom into one specific stage, stage -2, denial and deflection. This is the zone where you find all that defensive thinking, rewriting the past, and crucially, that shift and focus away from the impact of what was said or done and onto the supposed intent behind it. All right, so let's actually apply the Six Stages Framework. Let's see how this framework perfectly shines a light on the language that we heard from Nigel Farage. We're going to connect those quotes directly to the hallmarks of stage -2. So, taking the Six Stages Framework lens, this kind of language places Nigel Farage's comments squarely in stage -2. The wording isn't just a little evasive, it's a textbook example of denial and deflection in action. Yeah, this stage has some classic telltale signs, such as things like focusing on intent, trying to reframe what's happened, or maybe rewriting a bit of history. That quote we heard earlier, not with intent, it wasn't my intention, it fits this pattern perfectly. It tries to recast the behavior of the person, by making it all about the speaker's self-perception and not about the harm that it may have caused. And it's not just one person's analysis here. It's not just my analysis through the 6 stages framework. Katz, the former chair of the Labour Jewish movement, argued that this type of defense is basically an attempt to say that really harmful comments just don't matter. And he made it crystal clear, he just can't do that. And all of this really gets us to the core principle of this whole discussion and issue. The fundamental conflict that the 6 stages framework helps us to see so clearly is the difference between intent and impact. So let's break this down. A stage minus 2 response, like we've just discussed, is all about intent, what I meant to do. The speaker's motive is the only thing that matters to them. But we all know that real accountability requires a shift, to focusing on impact, acknowledging how my words and actions actually landed for other people. So the crucial point is this. The 6 stages framework reminds us that racism and harm are not just about malicious intent. Harmful words and actions cause real damage, no matter what the person meant to do. And here's why this matters on a much bigger scale. When public figures use this kind of language, they're not just defending themselves. They're actually building what's called permission structures. They're basically signaling to the rest of society that it's okay for everyone else to dodge accountability in the very same way. Okay, so if denial is the problem, what does the solution look like? Well, the great thing is the 6 stages framework also gives us a map to that. The positive side of the 6 stages framework shows us what the path towards growth and towards real accountability looks like. So instead of deflection, the journey to growth starts with stage +1, simply recognizing that harm or bias might have happened. From there, you move to stage +2, which is about taking genuine responsibility, not deflecting, not shifting in your seat and trying to avoid. It's about taking genuine responsibility. And the journey continues up to stage +3, which involves a real commitment to learning and being an active ally. It's a clear shift from being defensive to being reflective. And that gets to the real purpose of the 6 stages framework. It's not a tool for pointing fingers or assigning blame. It's a map. It shows us where we are, and it gives us a clear, actionable path toward growth, empathy, and being more inclusive, which leaves us all, with a final and really important question to think about. In this age of deflection and denial, what does real, meaningful accountability actually look like for public figures and for us all? And how can we all help shift the conversation away from intent and toward impact?